Then you see the true face of the individual,
The narcissism, the
narcissism,
histrionic
psychopath,
personality
yeah,
disorder.
the psychopath.
Definitely, I see those in my own mom. And psychopathy, can you just speak to a little bit of that as a comorbidity? Because I think when people hear psychopathy, they think one thing, and that is the extreme end of psychopathy, which is you are a hardened criminal, if not a serial killer. But does psychopathy exist on a spectrum?
Well, yes, the overwhelming vast majority of psychopaths have nothing to do with serial killing, not even as a hobby, and they actually cope well. They're pillars of the community. They are chief executive officers. For example, there are studies by Babiak and Hare, which have demonstrated that the prevalence of psychopaths among chief executive officers, surgeons in operating rooms, is much higher than in the general population. So most psychopaths are functional, pro-social, socially adaptive, and so on and so forth. The only difference between a psychopath and a healthy person is that psychopaths would tend to be goal-oriented, they would lack empathy, and therefore they would be callous, reckless, unscrupulous, and immoral. That's one reason why there's a debate whether psychopathy is a mental illness at all.
Oh, that's
Or,
fascinating.
yeah.
Yeah, that's
So
fascinating.
in the case of borderline personality disorder, coming back to the topic, the
Mhm.
comorbidity with antisocial personality disorder, which is a clinical name for psychopathy, the comorbidity is pretty high. Actually, there are some learned guesses that about 1 in 3 borderlines would also be a psychopath.
I
And
would love to talk to you about this a little bit, just because, again, in the case of, my mom is the template for the idea of the difficult mother, the borderline mother. She could be in public, at events, at family gatherings, even dealing with strangers. The charm would just come on like that. Extremely charismatic, has a gravitational pull. People just wanted to be around her, be near her. Even if she could be outright, clearly mean, say something mean, people would laugh it off. Like, oh, that's just Mary, that's how she is. And then the child becomes, I think, even more confused because they see the mother interfacing with the rest of the world as this lovely, charismatic, just magnetic personality. And behind closed doors, the child is actually treated to the opposite. And what happens is the child becomes very confused. I'm speaking about myself. Who would believe me when I say that behind closed doors, my mother can be a monster?
well, first of all, I hate to break it to you, but you're describing a psychopath, not a borderline. One of the key diagnostic features and clinical features of psychopathy is superficial charm and glibness. It's a key feature, which
It's also a key feature of narcissism, right?
to a much lesser extent.
Really?
It's actually the antisocial dimension in narcissism. It's definitely psychopathic. But coming back to your question, I tend to digress and I apologize, but coming back to your
No
question,
problem.
the main message that such a mother conveys to her child is something's wrong with you. Something is wrong with you. Other people love me, you don't. Or other people behave one way, you behave another way. You're incapable of making me feel good. You're incapable of making me happy. So there's always a message, an underlying message of you're a failure. You're constantly failing me. You're a disappointment. And so if you happen to be the scapegoat and not the golden child, and these are transitory roles, by the way, but if you happen to be,
Exactly. I was often a scapegoat. I was often a golden
yeah,
child. I will
yeah.
say my mom did a lot of things right with me and encouraged me in so many ways, but there were other times where there was nothing I could do to satiate her need for love and attention.
That is what I've mentioned earlier, the approach,
Hmm.
avoidance, repetition, compulsion. That's
Hmm.
the inability to actually reach a plateau of intimacy and so on. When the child gratifies such a mother, when the child meets the mother's expectations and needs, she feels suffocated. She feels threatened because in her mind, she's expected to reciprocate and she is unable to reciprocate. And so she feels that she's being set up for failure or that she's being framed somehow. And at that very moment, she flips and she renders the child a persecutory object. She renders the child